Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishrealm. Welcome back to another video. As you can see from the title of this video, we are here to talk about some things in books that I do not enjoy at all. Like, not whatsoever. And so I've done a video like this before, I believe, but I think it's been like a year since I've done this video, so I'm excited to be jumping back in and adding to my ever-growing list of things that I am discovering in books that I do not readily enjoy. But before we get started in this video, I'd like to thank this video's sponsor, and that is a Book of the Month. So if you didn't know, which I'm hoping you all know at this point, that Book of the Month is a fast-growing and super popular online book service. Their mission is to support new and emerging authors and help readers find books that they're going to love. How it works is that the Book of the Month team spends a whole bunch of time vetting through hundreds of books, and they come up with a specially curated list of books for readers to choose from. That way they can spend more time reading and less time researching. And this curated list is early and new release titles. So that does mean that sometimes you get the opportunity to read books before they actually do end up releasing. One of my favorite things about Book of the Month, as I always say, and I will stand by this, is that they provide so many different options for readers, whether you love historical romance, whether you like historical fiction, whether you like contemporary, whether you like nonfiction, thriller, mystery, fantasy. They have a little bit of it all. And as someone who reads across so many different genres and age categories, this is definitely a plus and a benefit for me. Book of the Month also has this great skip policy. So if there's ever a month where you don't like the list of books that have been curated, you can just skip that month and you will not be charged for it. Book of the Month also has the best rates for newly released hardcovers. I mean, let's be honest, in this economy, paying $30 for a newly released hardcover is just not cutting it. But today, with my code Bookishrealm, you can get your first book with Book of the Month for $9.99. So imagine getting a newly released hardcover of your choice for $9.99 instead of paying $30. $30 now is not even really a full tank of gas. I will be sure to leave the code and the link down in the description box below. Let's go ahead and jump in and see what the selections are for this month. So every month your selections are going to come in this blue Book of the Month box. For the month of February, there are 5 selections included: Someone Else's Shoes, Georgie All Along, The Writing Retreat, River Sing Me Home, and Mame. So the first title that I decided to go with this month was Mame by Jessica George. This one focuses on a main character who has a mother who spends a lot of time in Ghana, and she basically is left at home to be the caretaker of her father, who has an onset of Parkinson's disease. So when her mother decides to return back from a trip in Ghana, she decides that she's going to take life by the horns and actually live her life. It means getting her own flat share, going out for after work drinks. I think this is going to be a book about self-discovery and family and the things that bind us together and also tear us apart. And the next selection that I went with this month was River Sing Me Home. I had this one as one of my most anticipated releases for the month of February. This book specifically looks at, it's a historical fiction that looks at a main character by the name of Rachel, who is a slave on a Barbados plantation. Once slavery ends in 1843, everyone thinks they're going to be free, but the plantation owner then says that, never mind, you're not all free, you're going to end up working for me as my apprentices for another 6 years. So she decides to make a run for it, and this book follows her journey of attempting to find her 5 children that she gave birth to that were all sold away. So she's trying to figure out whether they're alive, how they've been, where they could possibly be. And so this is going to be probably an extensive and heartbreaking journey to follow along with. All right, y'all, so those are the books that I selected for Book of the Month this month. Like I said, if you're interested in checking them out and getting your first book for $9.99, you can use my code Bookishrealm, which I will leave in the description box below, as well as a link to Book of the Month. As always, thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Okay, y'all, so let's jump really quickly into these 5 things that I do not particularly care for when it comes to books. The first one, the very first one, being writing out of the target demographic in terms of age. What I mean with this, and this is specifically targeted at YA, I am having trouble. I read across so many different age categories and so many different genres. I think what I've been struggling with, and I have a whole discussion video about this, what I've been struggling with greatly is the fact that there are authors and publishers now who are attempting to essentially market their stuff as being a part of one age demographic, but then having authors write in a way that it seems as though it's catering to another age demographic. So for example, I don't really feel like I should be picking up a YA book and it's nostalgic for me at the age of 31. I think that these books are supposed to be written for teens, that they should be catered towards teens, that these characters should reflect the experiences of the teen population that they are supposed to be serving. It frustrates me as an adult who readily does read YA because I do find it enjoyable, but I know going in that this book is not supposed to be targeted at me. This is written for a different audience. I read a lot of it out of enjoyment and also because it's part of my job to keep up with a lot of the, YA teen titles that are releasing. I just get really frustrated when I pick up a YA book and I'm like, dang, I feel like this book was written for me at 31, and I feel some type of way about that because I feel like there are teens who are missing out. I know that I've had this discussion, like I said before, and probably one of the hardest age groups to write for when it comes to young adult literature is probably anywhere from 11 to 14 or 12 to 14. That is like the sweet spot for finding absolutely no. There's suggestions out there, but it's difficult to find those recommendations that would be appropriate for that age category. So that's definitely one thing. It's a trend that I'm seeing in literature that I'm not really caring for. I think middle grade is still doing a good job. Children is still doing a good job of writing for those age demographics, but YA has found where the money is, and it's with adult populations my age, maybe I would say maybe anywhere between 7 to 10 years younger than me. So we're being catered to instead of the population that these books are supposed to be catered to. So that's huge pet peeve for me. Another one that I have is one that has just come up recently, and I'm using a specific book as an example for this one, and that is The Black Queen. So this book just released in January 31st, I think was the release date for this book. I was really excited about it. I knew that it was going to be touching on racial relations in the Deep South. It's written by an author that is a journalist that specializes in looking at race relations. And so it wasn't so much about the discussion in race relations, but how the narrative centered a white woman when this book was supposed to be about Black folks. That is a huge pet peeve for me. If you are going to write books about the experiences of those impacted by racism, systemic racism, I would rather you not market this book as if it is about the plight of Black people and really the narrative centers white folks. I think that if that was how it was marketed and that's what we were going into and looking for, then okay, that's different. Then I know that that's the expectation. But when you're going into a book and then the book, which is definitely heavy with Black characters, it's a Black person on the cover, and then you end up with a story that centers a white woman realizing so much about her white privilege, it throws me for a loop. I think it'll throw any reader for a loop, and it just did not work at all. And I did not know that this was a pet peeve. I mean, clearly it would be a pet peeve, but I didn't realize how much it shows up in literature, especially in a lot of teen stuff, until recently, becoming more actively aware of what I'm consuming, how it's being marketed, what's being laid out, and just being a more careful reader has brought me full circle to the fact that this is not a thing that's ever going to work for me when it comes to books. I think there are a lot more teen titles that have this issue than adult titles. I could be wrong with that, but I feel like it's more of a prominent aspect in teen books. This next one is one that I have started to notice about myself based off of the romance that I'm reading. I personally do not like pet names for anatomical body parts. It is not my thing. Please do not talk about body parts as if, just these weird names. I've seen some very strange names for body parts of characters, and my preference is that, if you want to stick to the correct anatomical name, or if you would like to stick to more common slang, I'm perfectly fine with that. But giving these like names and personas to body parts is just, I get it. I get it. Some people love it. I'm just not one of those people. I just don't really enjoy it. The whole personification of a body part is just, oh goodness gracious. I didn't realize how much I struggled with it until like I've been reading some romance lately, and I'm like, ooh, I don't really care for that. It's not to say that it completely destroys a romance book for me, because I'm reading romance for the, you know, the HEAs, the HFNs, the really mushy gushy cute lovey-dovey parts of the book, not just primarily the sex. The sex is an added bonus, of course, but because it's not the primary reason, I think that even with that little tidbit in it, it doesn't bother me to where I'm like, oh, I can't read any book like that. But I did notice that it does kind of grate my nerves just a little bit. I'm like, the fourth thing that I have on my list is also another one that I have extensively talked about before through a video. This is writing outside of one's lived experience without extensive research and sensitivity readers. That is a huge thing for me. I have done a lot of reading about people writing outside of their lived experience, and it's a very tricky topic. It's not very black and white. It's definitely a gray area of who should write what stories. And I did a whole discussion and really tapped into what Jacqueline Woodson has said about people taking the opportunity to write the stories of those who have not even had the opportunity to write their own stories. And so I definitely look to that a lot whenever I'm thinking about how comfortable I am reading a book with someone writing outside of their own lived experience. And that's not to say that it can't be done. I've seen some authors who have done it very, very well, but they are very meticulous in their research. They are very meticulous in the representation and making sure that they're coming from a place that is well-rounded and not feeding into stereotypes. It takes a lot of planning to delve into writing on certain subject matters that are not your own lived experience, and including sensitivity readers. And so there are some authors who make sure, full stop, that they check every box in terms of, I want to be sure that I'm writing this from a place that is honest and true and not stereotypical. And even then, sometimes even when some people have the best intentions, there is sometimes content that kind of does slip through the cracks, but you can tell that their intentions were well. Now, some people just come out here and they just write shit because they think it's going to sell, i.e. you have white romance authors out here writing black love in an attempt to make money off of it because they know that it's something that people are interested in, without taking into consideration how to write these characters in ways that's not stereotypical, that doesn't feel like it's appropriation, in a way that's respectful to the race or ethnicity or culture or group that they are representing. It's not an easy task, and so I'm very, very weary of that. Anytime I step into a book of someone writing something from an experience that's not theirs, I tiptoe, and I don't really care for it a lot when there is a clear indication that this person has not done their research and has not taken the necessary care to represent said community in the best light. So there's that. I'm kind of like, those are one of those things where it's like I can't, that's one of my non-negotiables. I just can't, if it's poor representation and it's not, and that's, let me backtrack here a little bit. I'm talking over myself. That's not to say that somebody can't write a bad a bad book of representation from their own lived experience, because that is a possibility. I have seen it happen before as well. I think that it is more drastic and apparent sometimes when it is not from that person's lived experience. But that's not to be said that you can't have a lived experience and write horribly about your own lived experience. Trust me, yes, I have seen it happen. And the last thing that I have is also something that is specifically tied to a book. And this is when authors do harm or damage to their characters for the sake of progression of plot. I struggle with this quite a bit, y'all. I am not someone that will enjoy when characters start to, I don't want to say misbehave, but they act out of character. Meaning that if you've spent an extensive period of time molding and creating these characters, not to say that they can't change, but you've created this whole persona, correct? And so as a reader, when you're reading this persona, you get to know this character and there are many layers. it is very awkward as a reader to go into another book and you don't recognize the characters. And then it becomes very evident that the persona has completely changed to help drive a plot that the author wants to push forward. A good example of this is Children of Blood and Bone. Now, there is some questions about who legitimately has written any of these books. I'm not going to dive into that because that's all speculation, although I do find the speculation to be quite interesting, and it doesn't really seem that way off base. But I really did enjoy Children of Blood and Bone. I know it's hit or miss with some people. Some people feel like it's ripped off of Avatar. Some people are like, yeah, it's not that good. And then there's people like me who are like, I really enjoyed this book. So imagine my surprise when I go into Children of Virtue and Vengeance and realize that these feel as though they're two different books. And the reason why, for me, I did a whole reading vlog on this. The reason why these books felt so different is because the characters were acting in very unusual and abnormal ways. I felt like I dealt with one set of characters in the first book, and by the time I get to the second book, I recognize no one because their characteristics, the way they move, even the way that they had conversations was entirely different from the first book. Now I can understand having a plot that forces a character change, but creating a character change with no plot reason just so you can push the plot forward is very awkward to me. The characters were intentionally changed to justify a plot that happened later on in the book, as opposed to a plot happening at the beginning of the book and your characters progressively change in reaction to that plot. It was the complete opposite. You force your characters to change. That way you could create this explosive plot towards the end of the book. It just was a very strange thing, and I've seen it done once again in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, although I don't think it was as shocking as I think reading Children of Blood and Bone and Children of Virtue and Vengeance. But also in that series, our main character makes a decision in that third book that felt very out of place and very out of character, and it made me feel like, okay, did we change this because we were looking for a way to wrap this story up and conclude it in a very unique way because we didn't know what else to do? So it's stuff like that I've noticed that for me as a reader, I don't like that. I don't do well, and I don't like when it comes as a surprise. I think if I see things happen in the plot and then the character gracefully, or not even have to be gracefully, gradually changes over the course of a book, and then we get a different set of characters by the end of another book, that doesn't bother me as much. But stepping into a book at the beginning and halfway through and all of a sudden your characters do a 180, it's like whiplash. And who likes whiplash? Not me. I don't know if y'all like whiplash, but I sure as hell do not. Alright y'all, that's it for me. Let me know in the comment box below what things and books do you absolutely loathe or hate. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support this channel via Patreon or Amazon wishlist, they're down below in the description box below. And as always, I will be back with another video soon.